have you guys been? It's been a month,
Mhm. It's
basically.
been a little bit.
It, my life has been so eventful. It is
Um,
so crazy, but it's
What happened?
settling down.
What the fuck happened?
Just like tons of work with being in a grad program and um, being involved, like super involved on campus and super involved in the community and all that kind of shit. Just keeps me very busy,
yeah,
but
I
it's a
feel
very
you on the
good busy.
busiest.
I feel that I failed EMT school, so I got to retake it next semester.
Oh no, Chase.
And it's not that big of a deal. Although I am gonna miss all the people because the
Did
people
you
were
did
like,
you accidentally kill a guy?
yeah, I killed 90 people. I showed up with a gun, and you're not supposed to do that as an EMT.
Yeah,
I
that's a bad idea.
actually thought that firearms were part of the medicine part.
Yeah. You
That is
com-
my bad.
You
confuse a
thought, wait,
shotgun with a defibrillator
why would we have guns? We're EMTs.
because
What
they're.
the fuck?
I mean, how else are you gonna fight off the zombies as you're dragging the body
Oh
into the ambulance?
God,
Fucking
no! I want.
Chase
I
pulls out a gun in the middle of the ambulance, and the fucking dude on the stretcher is like, "What is that?" And Chase goes, "Don't worry, it's medicinal."
I want to write a fucking like an Eldritch EMT story so bad, or I might make it like a video game or something.
Do it.
That sounds so like imagine like you're an EMT, but also like your dude starts
Oh, like one of
vomiting.
those, yeah, like one of
Yeah,
those like POV, uh, point and click adventure kind of things.
I was thinking honestly, the only type of games that I know how to make are Twine games, but I could probably figure out something there.
Yeah,
That's far off though.
there's
I
a
got so
guy,
much shit.
yeah, there's a guy I need to suggest to you. You might like their games if you haven't played them. But anyway,
I have also been playing a lot of World of Darkness. Let me just shill this game for a sec. For
World of
our like
Darkness.
no, not
We're
World of
not even
Darkness.
sponsored.
Fuck, true.
Yeah.
Sorry, not World of Darkness. World of Horror. My bad. That Genji Ito.
Oh, I
Lovecraft.
love it. Yeah, yeah.
That game fucking slappy, dude.
Yeah, it's the official release is this 19th.
I know. I literally just started playing it.
No, yeah, I've been in the
I
open beta or whatever forever.
oh, it's so fucking good. So I'm just gonna shill that fucking game out
Yeah.
there to our maybe like
Yeah.
50 listeners.
Speaking of
Go play
people,
it.
yeah, go play it. And speaking of people, like Ito was obviously inspired by things like Lovecraft. So
Which brings us to our topic
yes,
for the
finally,
day.
right?
All right. Uh, are we gonna do it? Or we got to do the silence? We got to count 5
Oh
seconds.
yeah, 5 seconds of
Yeah, we got
awkward
to count.
silence is part of our gimmick.
Hey,
That's our gimmick. That's that's the worst gimmick ever.
That's our gimmick.
It's like the
Awkward
worst.
silence at the beginning, meandering and awkward silence for the first 10 minutes of every podcast.
Exactly. Okay,
It's
so here we
good.
go. All
We're
right,
very
you got to count.
professional.
You got to count. Right, 5 seconds. Okay.
No, don't count it. It won't be
Fuck.
awkward.
Well,
if you
not
count
out
it.
loud, but yeah. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
H.P. Lovecraft.
the
Was that-
least racist Yankee.
Yeah, it was a hell of a guy. It was a hell of a guy.
God. Okay, so I'm gonna give him an introduction. I'm gonna explain kind of what he is for like the one person who doesn't know.
Yeah,
who he
I
is
was
at
about
this
to
point.
say the
Yeah.
one person.
But just in case you're like a teenager who's like looking into him or something, or you just
He
have been
wrote
living under a
stories.
rock.
He had a very big chin.
He had a very big chin. He was hideously ugly.
Oh, leave him alone. That's
no,
mean.
he deserves it.
No, that's
listen, he wasn't
mean.
ugly. He was just hiding a bird in his mouth at all times.
Leave him alone. All right.
Okay, so H.P. Lovecraft was one of the most influential horror authors of all time. He invented a genre called cosmic horror, which we'll go over a little bit later, I think. What do you guys think? We should structure it, like go into a little bit, like what it is, what the elements of it are, and then we could talk about like
Sure.
inspirations and stuff.
I'm guessing you're well, okay. Well, let's just continue.
Okay, so yeah, H.P. Lovecraft, he inspired so many writers to do so much cool shit. Half of the horror stuff that you know about today, dear listener, would not exist if not for H.P. Lovecraft. That being said, he was a massive piece of shit, which we'll also go
Oh my
over.
god. Is that what we're doing?
Look, he's dead. He can't hear us. He
Okay,
can't hear us no more.
All right, you drank plenty of haterade today. Let's go.
But yeah, what did you guys first learn about H.P. Lovecraft? Because I remember learning about H.P. Lovecraft being like a pivotal moment in my life where I like went from normal to whatever the fuck I am right now.
I think I've always been this way for me, at least in my case. But yeah, for me, it was probably my I was probably like 11 or 12 when I first started looking at it.
You started reading H.P. Lovecraft at 11 or 12?
Something like that. Yeah.
I think
How
that's
the-
about when I did as well.
How the fuck did you guys like decipher his writing? His shit is like, and then the gibbering mass of
Yeah, it's called, I don't know. It might be my 130 IQ,
yeah. It's am I maybe you're just not.
And maybe me and
intelligent enough.
Elijah are geniuses, and you're just
Yeah, I don't know if you knew this, Chase, but it actually takes a very high IQ to appreciate H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, let's just insert let's do the Rick and Morty copy pasta and put H.P. Lovecraft in instead.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description.
Yeah,
The whole thing. The whole
Rick
goddamn
and Morty,
thing.
yeah, the whole pasta. It takes a high IQ.
I guess for me, so like I've always been really interested in writing, but I was a kid who was like really into stuff like high octane action shit. Like I was really into the Resident Evil movies, not the games yet. I got into those.
Those movies I was never into
those okay, look, I'll defend. Those movies were good, okay? But in like they're like good trash, you know.
If I could think of a reason to cancel anybody, it would be that. Jesus Christ.
What's Look, I will defend those movies to my dying breath, okay? They're so stupid. I love them so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I discovered H.P. Lovecraft when I was like a teenager. And it, I don't know, changed me in a weird way. Like I went from like kind of normal to like a goth Lovecraft kid, and I would I'd play Call of I know. I would oh god, I started carrying around a copy of no, it was a copy of H.P. Lovecraft's like stories.
I thought you were going to say the Necronomicon.
No, I did. I carried the Necronomicon. I carried H.P. Lovecraft stories, and I carried House of Leaves around with me.
Was it the Simonomicon? The Necronomicon that's like written by the dude that just like is like pseudonym of Simon?
Yeah, some guy wrote it.
Yeah,
it's not an ancient thing.
I love the Simonomicon because it's like everyone looks at it and they're like, oh yeah, I love H.P. Lovecraft. This is so badass. It's like the book I read about. And then it's like some fucking dude. Like
it's some fucking dude who wrote it.
We'll get into the more like esoteric aspects. I feel like that would be a good place to go with it. I want to get into the weird shit.
So where do we want to go here? Who cares about us? People aren't here to listen about us.
Let's learn about Lovecraft. So H.P. Lovecraft was born. Wait, was he born in England or New England? New England, right? His family was from England.
I think he was,
And he was kind of okay. So my hot Lovecraft take is that transition could have saved her. Okay.
You always say this.
Transition could have saved her. That's all I'm going to say. Okay.
All right. Fine.
Sorry.
Unfucking hinge thing to say.
Don't get Chase started on this. This is what it's gonna. This is not what the podcast is about. Please, your theory.
So it started off. His wacky childhood started off because his mom was kind of neurodivergent, and she for some reason I don't know exactly why they did this, but they would dress him like a girl back in the day, right? And
makes sense. Happens to me all the time.
And he was just like always kind of weird, like socially awkward, kind of he was a very sickly boy. He was a very sickly child. He would play around in graveyards and stuff, and he was a massive Anglophile too. He was obsessed
He wished the British won.
Yeah, he was like very, well, racist, frankly. Like he was really into what's that like really shitty like science where they like it's like craniometry or something.
Oh, you're thinking of phrenology.
Yeah, he
Oh,
was really
yeah.
into phrenology. He was known as the racist amongst his race's friends. He said
That
Hitler was a cool guy.
he was
Literally.
not though. He all his friends are racist. We're talking like the 1910s and
No,
1920s here.
that's the thing though. That's how racist he was because
Oh, okay.
he was known as like
Well,
the unhinged
well, the
racist amongst
xeno.
his
He was a
white.
xenophobe more than a, I would say, and specifically a racist. I don't think he even trusted like other types of white people that weren't
Yeah,
Anglos.
you had to be like a specific type of white person. You couldn't be like
Yeah.
the American white. You couldn't
It's
be. Yeah.
it's worth noting that like I think Schizoid has the right of it here because he also notoriously like he notoriously hated Irish people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is like
It's just the more different they were from the culture he's used to and his own upbringing, and the less he trusted and liked those people.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what it came down to more than anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. He was very like if it is different, it is like a threat and it's bad somehow.
Yeah.
And he was just
Yeah.
like fearful of it. And throughout his life, he wrote a lot of he never wrote any novels. He wrote a novella. He wrote At the Mountains of Madness, which is like 50 pages long. That's like the longest thing he ever wrote. But the main focus and the running theme throughout the entirety of his stories was this idea of cosmic horror, this idea of
Cosmicism, right? I think it's
cosmic, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use the word cosmic horror because I think it's like more accessible, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know. He like the general idea behind his writing was this idea that human beings are these insignificant, like teeny tiny little speckoids in this massive universe filled with not evil gods, but indifferent, apathetic gods that look at us in the same way that you would look at like an ant or something. You say, oh, look at that little ant. And if you're like a psycho, you'll like stomp it for no reason just because, you know, haha, funny ant, go squish. And this is many times something that I have noticed because I've been like binge reading him recently. There's a lot of like I hate to keep going back to the white supremacy thing, but there's a lot
Anglo
of
supremacy. You gotta be very
so
specific.
do we as a culture. I hate to keep going back
hate to keep
it.
going back, but it just keeps going there.
Yeah.
It a lot of times it was kind of used by him as a metaphor for other cultures kind of intruding on like white culture, I guess.
No,
But
just
this is
humanity. Oh, but I guess the comparison you're saying.
yeah. But what's really interesting about it though is that this is something that is much more comparable. The idea of cosmic horror is a lot more comparable to like the life of a minority group somewhere where you are this tiny little thing and there's this huge culture surrounding you. So it has been adopted recently by a lot of like LGBT people specifically really like not Lovecraft but Lovecraftian horror. That's something that you will see a lot. But yeah, his influence has been like massive.
I mean, it makes sense because if we're talking, it's probably a lot of those people in those kinds of minority groups probably have a lot of existential concerns. And so, I mean, that's essentially what most of the horror in his books are drawing from is existential, like worries and terrors, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I think that if you are depressed and you feel like an alien in your own world, then that's kind of the type of stuff that you would gravitate towards because it's very much something that embraces that feeling.
Or if you're misanthropic.
Or if you're misanthropic, yeah.
Yeah, because and a lot of people who feel alien are often misanthropic too. So I mean, it basically, I mean, if we're going with that idea, I like the concept that it makes all of humanity worthless. So then it makes your feelings of worthlessness that much more
Yeah,
diminished.
you feel like you kind of belong because
You belong
you
to the
are,
same
yeah,
emptiness.
you're like weirdly united with
Yeah,
everyone else in your insignificance or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
What about you, Eli? You got what's your what's your hot Lovecraft take? I'm curious now.
I I think that Lovecraft is, first of all, I think that many of the things that Lovecraft wrote about, Lovecraft saw. Because he had like a like seizure disorder.
Yeah.
And he sometimes talked about how during his like worst seizures, he would have like visions of hell or something similar. He may not have used that exact language. And so I think he may have seen those things in those like episodes, those like whatever they were, seizures, feverish episodes. Back in those days it was like your son has contracted the palsy, and it like that was just like the only thing you would get.
Go do cocaine
um
about it. You got ghosts in your blood.
yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
your son has contracted the fever and now he will have seizures forever. Like he may have been an epileptic, like we don't know. But he had these like sort of feverish seizure episodes. Um and in them apparently he saw quote unquote visions of hell, like is how I've seen it phrased. Um and so I think that like my hottest HP Lovecraft take is that he did not invent a single thing. Um
That's actually a really like common thing amongst like Lovecraft fans is they think that he was like channeling something, and it wasn't just in his seizures that he would see stuff too. In his dreams, the night gaunts, those big like leathery bat things, he would have dreams about these things like whisking him off into the like the skies, and he would see all kinds of shit.
well, yeah, and Lovecraft, like I want to be clear that whether or not Lovecraft's sort of cosmology um corresponds directly to reality is very much irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
Um but I find it interesting that he at least himself reported to have seen many of the things that he wrote about. I think that's interesting. The other thing that I think is interesting in Lovecraft's case is Lovecraft reminds me very much of, we've all had a friend who like really thought he was hot shit.
Yeah.
Like just really, really like he could have sworn that he was, the greatest guy ever. And he had all these original thoughts, and he had an understanding of politics and an understanding of economics and an understanding of so on.
Oh yeah, no,
That
he was a smart person, like racism removed. You know,
he was, yeah,
yeah.
well, and it's worth noting we've all had a friend who thought they were like the hottest shit. And importantly, because I want to draw this very big importance here, thought that they had ideas no one had ever had before. And because I'm more of a like social historian, philosophy kind of person, and I know a lot less about, like, obviously I've read a bunch of Lovecraft because, I'm the type of person who says yes to this podcast. But there is I think that Lovecraft's evolution as a social commentator is just as, if not more interesting than his like his horror writings. And one of the reasons why is because, as Schizoid's kind of gestured to, he was never sort of a how would you say, gross white supremacist, in the sense that he resisted what he considered to be like unbecoming, like uncouth forms of racism. it's important to remember that he was fundamentally like he was in favor of America having an enlightened aristocracy.
Yeah.
He remained a Republican, um, in the sense of, and when I say this, I mean in the sense of opposing monarchy. He remained a Republican when it came to the United States because he did not believe that such a nation as the United States could ever have a functioning monarchy. And I'll tell you that your most preeminent monarchist thinkers today all generally agree that the United States is kind of too far gone down the road of republicanism to ever like turn tail and become a monarchy.
Didn't he become a socialist like towards the end of his life?
So, and that's what I wanted to get to.
That's interesting.
H.P. Lovecraft, when the Great Depression started, he saw it coming because he was a smart dude. He paid attention to society, he read the news, etc. He saw it coming. And he was very open that the Great Depression would be when his ideal aristocracy came forward. His economic, his literary, his scientific aristocracy. So all of America's greatest thinkers would come out of the woodworks and recognize in one another a higher caste, and this higher caste would then rule American society. When the Great Depression became, like, for the rich people, just a new way to enrich yourself, you just have to be careful with your spending now. Lovecraft's view was believing in what he called fascism, but what all respected fascists at the time, whether they were racist or anti-racist, a lot of people don't know they were anti-racist fascists, whether they were racist or anti-racist, whether they were German style or Italian style or whatever, they were all like, that's not fascism. It's like a degraded form of Marxism. And the Marxists were like, that's not Marxism, it's a degraded form of fascism. But what he came up with was everybody should rally behind an enlightened aristocracy, and that enlightened aristocracy should control the economy, which is not really socialism either. So he didn't really change his
Sounds
opinions
like more of a
deeply.
technocrat.
He was a technocrat.
Yeah, he was a technocrat.
But
yeah.
It's important to realize as well that he, like many technocrats, just kind of assumed he would be a technocrat. Like that he would be one of the technets, one of the people running things. But he
That's
was
usually how it goes, honestly.
For all intents and purposes,
just like a lot of socialists think they're going to be the leaders.
think they're going to be general secretary, and in reality, they're going to be pushing papers. Yeah, like which, like, don't get me wrong, I would love to push papers and have my housing guaranteed. Like that's don't get me wrong. But
they
like
think they're going to be on the
clergy.
top of the food chain or the top of
the
power or status chain. Yeah.
But yeah, so Lovecraft's, and then
did we lose you?
Ayo, you still alive?
Oh no, did we lose Elijah? We might have lost Elijah for a minute there.
Fuck.
That's okay. We're good. I'm sure he'll be back. I was actually gonna
here.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, there you are. Sorry about that. You dipped out for a second.
You dipped out. Yeah, like cut off mid-sentence.
Weird. Okay. Well, then I'll just run it back and we can clip it.
Okay.
No, I'm not clipping. Well, I know Chase can clip it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Chase can clip it. We ain't doing shit. Anyway, so I'll cut it back to H.P. Lovecraft was very much changed his view on racism as well later into his life.
Yes, he was having a redemption arc. There was a redemption arc.
He considered his he wrote about his reactionary tendencies. He called them his reactions, right? He wrote about his reactions, and he said that they were a youthful embarrassment. That was a result of his upbringing. So H.P. Lovecraft, ironically, was a great example of why he was just raised like that doesn't really work. Because if anybody was just raised like that, it was Howard Phillips' cat named Lovecraft.
Yeah.
and towards the end of his life, he was like, "Oh fuck, I made a mistake." Like it turns out, like immigrants are people.
I want to get into something about Lovecraft. That I guess would be my hot take on him. would be that I think just like you mentioned the epilepsy and other issues and the dreams, and I honestly think that if I were to consider Lovecraft anything, I really do think he was somewhere on that schizo spectrum. I really
Oh
do.
yeah. Oh yeah.
I think you're
And
right.
no, yeah, but he might have, like, it's really interesting because this is a thing that I've seen people that are like this do in order to manage and cope. They tend to become very, very strong, sort of science focused materialist people, right? When because of the terror,
Mm.
anxiety, and discomfort it causes them to have, like, maybe dealing with something like delusions, dealing with something like hallucination, and there's certain types of positive symptoms. The way it's kind of like essentially, dealt with, and I think in the case of Lovecraft was by basically structuring and ordering his world as much as possible, right? And science provided him like a sort of structure that made him feel safe, right? Because and also you have to think his father uh his father died of syphilis, madness induced by syphilis, and the mother lost her mind after the father died, and they
Died
both
of
got institutional.
madness.
Yeah, they essentially died of madness, right? And of course, Lovecraft, learning more and more about things like, ideas regarding genetics and things like that, he started thinking like, oh shit, am I mad too? Do I have
Yeah.
a penchant for madness? And he might have had, there was no such thing as neurodivergency back then. It was just madness and not madness, right? And like that's it. There wasn't like autism. There wasn't, it was just
Madness Nation
madness.
check in.
You
Yeah,
are
yeah,
simply
it's just
mad.
madness. Yeah, exactly. It was just different varying forms
Mad.
of madness. Yeah. And so he was afraid that, there was something in him, something that was going to turn him, and he clung to science. He clung to logic and reasoning, and he also clung to other things as well, to culture. He clung to tradition. He clung to that. I think a lot of his xenophobia was actually very much fueled by anxiety
Yeah,
and
and
like existential terror.
this also
Uh,
brings me to a good point. Like the given that he
that's
had
why I don't think
this.
he's a piece of shit.
Okay, all right,
Chase.
all right. I'll back off. I'll
All
You're
take
right.
no, no,
off
no.
my
I'm
I'll
gonna
take
say
off my
this.
hater shades.
I'm gonna say this. I think Schizoid is right, and that is you've put into language a point that I haven't had the language to articulate, which is that he just like as much as there's these like stories of him like being notoriously racist and stuff, all these stories like could also be, yeah, he may have been crazy racist compared to his friends. He was probably suffering from some
He was
severe like
terrified. He was
disordered thinking.
terrified. The dude was
Yeah,
constantly in terror
and
and all the time.
he did get better. He was good friends with a gay person. He became a socialist, I
Yeah,
think,
he
kind of.
started his characters of his minority or his outside type characters started. He started making more complex. He
They
started
went
giving them
from
more nuance. Yeah,
they went from a nautical looking Negro
yeah, yeah, yeah.
to like actually and another thing, like his more cosmic horror oriented stories also kind of shifting. It started shifting into more fantastical like dreamscape stories. He would have gods and figures which were a lot more reminiscent of like classical gods. There was this one dude, I can't remember his fucking name for the life of me, but he was like a sky god or something, and he looked kind of like Zeus, and he rode a chariot around, and he was on some level like good and helpful. Like the cosmic horror stories, I feel like, and this might be a hot take, but they were his experience of clinging to those like safety blankets that you mentioned, those
Yeah.
like cultural blah 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 safety methods, safety blankets,
Yeah.
and then realizing, oh shit, this is just a fucking like illusion. This culture that I like so much, it's not, it's like a spook, right? It's not like real. And and the more he might learn about like science and stuff, the more he would like see like, oh, this is just material. This is this this safety blanket that I've been clinging to is it is a thin veil amidst the black seas of
Yeah,
infinity.
I mean, he was buds with Houdini, which is
He
interesting.
was? I
Yeah,
did not know that.
yeah, he was buds or correspondence wise with Houdini because both of them were. I think they had planned on working on something together because Houdini was writing a book before he died. I think the book was called like what was it called? It was called the cancer or the something of superstition or religion because Houdini and Lovecraft were both essentially they weren't just atheists, they were like anti-theists.
Okay.
And
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Interesting.
yeah. So they were both anti-theists and they both hated what was really popular during their own time still, um the seances and the
Oh yeah,
ectoplasm and
yeah.
all the spiritualists. Yeah. They
Can I just interrupt you for two
yeah, no, for
seconds to
sure.
say that and continue after I say this, but history has some of the wackiest crossover events in cinematic history.
Oh yeah,
Like
for sure.
fucking Karl Marx used to
And
be
Abraham Lincoln.
and Abraham Lincoln. Yes, they would write letters together.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to
No,
be clear so that we can get back to Schizoid's point, but I feel it necessary to clear that up. Karl Marx penned one letter to Abraham Lincoln who never replied. It's often overboard.
Yeah,
still
it
really
is.
funny.
It is very much overblown. I've actually heard that. But apparently Houdini and Lovecraft did share correspondence and they did have similar
It's
interests in their hatred for spiritualism and their kind of more anti-theistic positions on a lot of things, right? They thought of it all as superstition. And that's what's so interesting is that in the case of Houdini, I know that the reason that he became so staunchly against spiritualism is because he tried to like when he was younger he tried to like or at some point in his life he tried to contact his mother using the help of a spiritualist, and when he saw it was complete bullshit he just like began a crusade against it all.
That makes
um
sense.
and then yeah, with Lovecraft I think it's the same thing. He needed a world that was like material, cohesive, consistent. He needed essentially like a system that made sense to make the world make sense, and he had trouble letting that go, obviously, right? And I think his stories were kind of a way of letting out those demons because like that madness that he's always describing in his characters, from being overwhelmed, right, by knowledge, overwhelmed by truth, some grand unified truth about like our meaninglessness, right, in the face of some grand cosmic creatures and stuff. That stuff was that was his phobias. Like, like that's what I think. The stuff that he wrote stories that scared him is what I think. Ideas and stories about things that terrified him, maybe when he was younger, or still did.
Yeah, like
Um,
this stuff didn't like these weren't like happy stories. These weren't stories like that he wanted to be real. These were stories that were well, they were horror stories,
yeah. Well,
frankly.
nihilistic horror stories. Because
Yeah.
like that's kind of where I think for in the case of Lovecraft, I think he was just a lot of the times he was combating that night like that night those his nihilistic perspectives and the terror it would bring him. I really do think that was like it was a way his creatures or his mythos was kind of like a way to give a tangible form to that nihilistic terror, or that existential terror, because now they're
Yeah.
creatures, now they're beings, now they're gods. They have a face, they look like something, even though they're indescribable. They still have a body. It's tangible, you know.
well,
So
and
I don't know.
I'll say this. I know we always have a very strongly like psychologically informed perspective on this podcast. I wanted to say that I wanted to say that as someone with OCD,
Mm.
um, I get a nameless, formless horror. I get, for example, to speak to my own very personally, I get knowing you've broken the rules but not being able to define what they are.
I know that
I
exact feeling.
I
I
get
also have
like,
OCD.
you
I know
know,
exactly what you're talking about.
I get another good example is I get knowing you're contaminated, but not being able to figure out by what.
Oh
Like
God.
I know those feelings very deeply. And I think that Lovecraft probably knew them too. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons why Lovecraft's horror gripped me for quite some time was because as listeners may know this, they may not. Personality and psychological neuroses, like kind of disorders, tend to develop more as you go through the changes of puberty and the life changes and stress that brings. Um, as mine developed, I identified in Lovecraft, or in Lovecraft's writings, I should say, something of what I was feeling, even if it wasn't exactly the same, even if it
Oh
was
yeah.
fictionalized and all that. Schizoid's dead on the money for me, at least, because Lovecraft's like nameless, faceless horror that can kill you without blinking is kind of what a delusion feels like sometimes.
And,
Yeah, for sure.
and something that's I think a misconception about Lovecraft stories that I always like to bring up is that these horrors that would drive men insane when they would perceive them or see some grand truth or whatever, it didn't always happen. Um, there was a lot of times where, depending on the resilience, the toughness, the fortitude, the willpower of the character involved, they would be able to keep their sanity for extended periods of time.
Yeah.
And they would even be able to combat and thwart the efforts of some of these things that are working through proxy via occult or whatever. And I always found that really interesting because, like, for me, it felt, and usually the characters that were the most capable of like sort of keeping it together were the ones that would like be very scientifically minded or very much like had some kind of like way of
I had
making
never
sense of
put
it
that
all.
together.
Yeah,
You are
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
right.
most of the characters were pretty scientifically minded. Most of them were very much like,
Well,
I don't know, it's
it's
like a
worth
scholar or
noting
something.
yeah,
it's worth
academics,
noting that
academics.
we only, from H.P. Lovecraft stories, the way they were written was as academic reports of their
Yeah,
Yeah,
time.
yeah, a
yes.
lot
So
of the
we would
time, yeah.
only get stories from the ones who survived. So that would be why there are so many
H.P.
scientists that
Lovecraft, the first found footage
you
horror
were.
film.
Oh God, you're
Fuck.
so
No, no,
right.
Oh
I'm kidding.
God.
No, there's already some. Bram Stoker did it too. So he was inspired by Dracula. He loved Dracula. So yeah, there's found footage. The old found footage was found documents horror, right?
Oh, that's so
Um,
funny. Well,
I,
that's also it's funny because that even has a legacy back further than Stoker, because so many old grimoires claim to be like uncovered from the trunk of an Egyptian woman.
Yeah,
And
but
then it's like
from an
written by like
Egyptian
some
but
dude
woman.
but
named
but they
Johan.
yeah, I know, but they usually did that to like garner credibility for the document or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I
When
I,
Lo-
I
yeah,
That's
when
true.
Lovecraft did it, he did it explicitly because he was trying to do like proto ARG bullshit. Like
yeah,
he
yeah.
never talked about the Necronomicon. Like whenever it was brought up as to whether or not the
Let's get into the
Necronomicon,
occult here. Yeah, let's go.
yeah, whenever someone brought up the Necronomicon, he would always say something like, "Oh, I don't know if it's real or not." Ha ha. Because he was trying to do the, "Oh, what if it's real" thing, which is like really interesting from like a horror history perspective, that
Yeah.
these ideas, which would like later come to bear fruit later on, like with the Blair Witch Project and stuff, were it has like a long history. It wasn't like this sudden thing.
Yeah, no, it really wasn't. It really wasn't. But yeah, like but oh, man, I had an idea, but I lost it. That always happens. But I do
What?
like.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So what one of the ideas, since I mean this is this podcast, we got to get into the wackier stuff, obviously. Otherwise, what the
Always,
fuck are we even
always.
doing here?
Yeah.
Um, so I read this thing. I can't remember who it's by, but it compares some of Lovecraft's experiences with his hallucinations
Mhm.
to William Blake's hallucinations that he had. And the way that they talk about it is, so assume for a moment that they were both seeing real shit. Um William Blake would see stuff like angels in the trees. He would see all kind. He would have these visions, and he would like translate them into his poetry. Whereas Lovecraft, all of the shit that he saw was like horrifying, dark tentacles gonna rise up from the deep, blah blah blah. What I think is interesting is the idea that both William Blake and Lovecraft were seeing the same thing, but they had two different perspectives on this one thing. What they were seeing potentially was complete and total transcendence from the human to the divine. And that can be a fucking terrifying experience, like generally. Or it could be a fucking wonderful experience, generally.
They're just having visions of biblically accurate angels and interpret it differently
the whole time.
Yeah,
I mean, and I know Eli can attest to this. Like going into occultism generally is absolutely batshit fucking terrifying. But
yeah, it can be. Yeah.
But you are also a Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have been known to associate myself with Christianity, indeed.
Just a mild, a loose association, if you will.
Yeah, we have our bouts.
I think you mentioned
I just said in my sermon on Sunday that I took the scenic route to Christianity, and I think that's a good polite way to phrase being previously involved in the occult.
The scenic route to Christianity. Wait, what was the story about how you became? Wait, no, that's right. You didn't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, no, that's forbidden knowledge. We can't talk about that here.
Yeah, sorry, that's in the Necronomicon. It may or may not exist.
It's verbatim.
Actually, speaking of the Necronomicon, have you ever actually attempted any of the rituals from like the Simon Necronomicon?
Yeah, I did.
The Simonomicon?
Yeah.
No, I kind of thought they were low-key a huge joke.
No, I did because like I wanted to scare my friends at the time because they thought it was real. So I mean, they were scared. They thought like, and so I was like, yeah, let's do it. It'll be cool. And like, and it was honestly I was just being edgy. I think an edgy teenager.
Yeah, fair. I honestly like I don't know very much, but like from what I read, it's mostly just like sigil magic, but like without the banishing rituals. It's like Goetia, but there's now nothing that you have to banish because that's not in the book itself. So you're just stuck with it, I guess, and that's like the spooky nature of it or something.
I mean, that's
I don't understand the Simonomicon well enough to comment.
Okay, well, what I do understand about the Simonomicon is that all he did was get basic occult ritual like tropes, put in shit that is Cthulhu mythos or cosmic horror inspired, because the guy who wrote it read Lovecraft, and then kind of created essentially what would be like another piece to the ARG that is the Cthulhu mythos or the Lovecraft mythos.
Fair, but that's also like, I mean, chaos magic, right? That's essentially what they were doing.
He takes Simon takes like stuff. Simon takes inspiration from the methodology of chaos magic. Yes.
Yeah, but like taking chaos magic and then like fucking yourself with it, because like if you're a chaos magician, you're like, oh, I'm gonna summon Batman or something. That's one thing. If you're a chaos magician and you say, I'm going to summon an incomprehensibly terrifying God.
But that's not what's in the Necronomicon, though. That's not how they're described in the Necronomicon. Like
they're not. They're
no, but
terrifying.
in the Necronomicon, it doesn't describe them the same way that Lovecraft describes them. It describes them in ways that like they're actually beneficial for you to summon them. Right? If you're trying to make certain types of, it's like the same way. God, they honestly seemed less malevolent than like the Keys of Solomon demon summoning. Because it was all fiction. So like he just wanted to write. The Simonomicon is just a spooky book that used written by a guy who had a decent knowledge of occult systems of the time, and then he got Lovecraft shit, and he kind of templated that shit.
I guess so, but like also depending on your perspective, it
Yeah.
could be used as an actual like occult grimoire. It'd be a
Oh,
really
yeah.
edgy and dumb one, but it could
Oh,
be.
yeah,
Well,
it could.
here's
You
the thing.
could, yeah.
I know people who, well, I knew people who did say that it could be useful
Yeah.
in the right context.
It's just
I
another
just,
madness. Yeah.
yeah, it's just chaos magic fundamentally where you strip the sort of what they consider an aesthetic veneer, but what many I guess more traditionally oriented magicians would consider the substance of the system, but you strip away much of the system and you're left with an underlying tech. And that's the basis of chaos magic, is that all magic can be stripped down to an underlying tech.
Yeah.
And the Simonomicon is a great example of stripping. I do believe Goetia was one of the big influences, but of stripping magic down to a tech and then putting a new veneer over top of it. And so everything in it is
Oh, that's
pretty
true.
standard. And I will say that it does seem a lot more benevolent than the Goetia. And one of the reasons why is because it's not a revealed system. It's not a system that was found by field experimentation or anything like that. It
They just
it
kind of
is a
slapped it together.
self-confessed like personal invention.
Yeah.
And as such, everything in it is going to be not only regular, in the sense of not only regular in the sense of, you know, behaving the same way every time, but also relatively useful to the summoner, to the whatever, the magician,
Mhm.
because the person who made it was like trying to make I think the Necronomicon, like the Simonomicon, I think it works best when it's read as a really fascinating piece of non-traditional fiction.
Yeah, because like essentially he's kind of in a really weird way creating he's bringing like kind of a Lovecraftian quote unquote religion to life. He essentially is making his own religious system, and he is giving you the book to do that religious system.
Yeah. And that's, it's a neat experiment, and I think the Simonomicon is neat as like a novelty thing. I think that the original Necronomicon in the Lovecraft text, one of the things that I find interesting is that Lovecraft's like monsters and so on are often found by or target people who sought out knowledge they did not have. I think that comments on the author's concerns, in a way that I think often isn't given credit. He was such a scientific, he was such an ordered person, and yet he knew, like if we assume that what he's writing is what he fears, right? He
Yeah.
knew that there were things that you should not seek, knowledge it was better not to have. And I think that's interesting because I think that goes beyond, obviously it's a very Adamic motif, right?
Yeah.
It very much calls back to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but it's also a very, I want to say, psychologically informed motif. Um, as Stephen Burnett, MC Ride of Death Grips, once said, "I've seen footage, I stay noited." Some things are better left unseen. Um, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was also thinking with the Necronomicon, you can even point out that if I gave Simon the most good faith of good faith, I mean, and if he was in fact as knowledgeable as he was on these systems in order to create it, which he was obviously if he made something like this, um, is that I mean, it could have been in and of itself, it is, but I don't know if that was his intention, but it is kind of a statement as to um how some of this tech, as you described it, Elijah, is so malleable that the imagery and the symbols that you place up against it are far less relevant than the system itself, right? So it's almost like saying what you put in matters less than the system. The system is what makes it work to a certain degree. It's not the contents or the things you were necessarily trying to summon, because whatever you're summoning or you're trying to access, the representations of concepts, and they could take almost any form. So like I remember I read an article, somebody that made a joke about like if somebody wanted to, they could write a Necronomicon, use the similar systems, or you make them even more complex, and then change it to Disney characters, and it would still be just as functional.
Well, here's the thing though. A big part of chaos magic is like charging sigils, and people will use like all kinds of shit to do that. Like they will either like jerk off onto a piece of paper, or they'll like hurt themselves somehow.
That's the most common one. He
Jerk
is
it
not
off.
shitting you. Yeah. Yeah.
No, hell
Yeah.
yeah.
Funny.
Hell
I
yeah,
mean,
brother.
just another excuse to bait.
Hell yeah, dude.
Occultists are just coomers.
Just a couple of baiters
Just
just
a bunch of
hanging out.
coomers. That's all they.
But using that cosmic horror as a charging method, because one thing that I used to do to charge my sigils was I would do something really scary. I would watch or I would like
really weird porn. He would watch
I would watch
really
really
strange porn.
really weird porn, and it would scare me, and it would awaken things in me, and then I would use that energy to charge the sigil. So who's to say that you can't use this like admittedly really powerful emotion, this emotion of like cosmic insignificance, as a method for charging sigils?
Terror, just terror.
I mean, that would be
an
a really
arachnophobe and just I gotta charge their sigils by dropping a spider on their lap.
yeah. Just plop that bad boy on there.
Well, it's
no
worth
wonder
noting
people
that
choose
the sigil,
jacking off instead of that.
the sigil is charged specifically by being implanted in the subconscious, such that every time you see it, it would activate a sort of internal intuition. A lot of people misunderstand the sigil itself doesn't have any power. It's its implantation into your subconscious.
Yeah.
And
So wait, with the implementation of that into your subconscious, how does it make change in the material world? Like, what's the connection?
because they're connected. So a good chaos magician views the internal world as a microcosm and the external world as a macrocosm. This is a very hermetic perspective, very hermetic cosmology.
But it's not in like a solipsist way. It's not in like this. My brain is the only thing that's real.
Some chaos magicians can skew towards that, but in my experience, it's a lot more common. They are viewing the world as deeply interconnected that it is impossible for them to affect only one part of it. They would not believe that they are ever in a position wherein they are either chiefly or only or whatever affecting one part of the world. They are affecting their mind, and their mind is connected to the outside world. The outside world affects their mind. As above, so below. As below, so above. This is one of the Hermetic laws laid out by Hermes Trismegistus in the Kybalion.
That's how you fucking pronounce that. I've been pronouncing it Kybalion or Kybalion. I have had no idea how to fucking pronounce it.
Would you like to know the secret to pronouncing occult words?
What's the secret?
Do your best and have fun.
Okay,
not like I'm not positive I'm pronouncing that correctly. I used to say Goetia all the time till I met somebody who was from like a like hereditary lineage practicing it, and they said it a certain way, so I just adjusted.
I've read grimoires where there's words that I don't think you're supposed to be able to pronounce because they put like vowels and like they put everything in the most insane places. Like I've seen like words that are like literally like it'll be like X, Y, and then like Q or like Q with another R. Like it'll just be like fucking like the craziest mix of letters. And it's like its name is like it's just like I had no idea. And
They
those
have
are
some of
those,
the fucking nerdiest goddamn names in the entire world too. Honestly, as much as I love them, they're dorky. It's a dorky name.
no, I'll try to remember. I don't know if it was Le Petit Albert that was like
Yeah,
that.
the Le Petit Albert. Le
I don't know if it
Petit
was.
Albert has some good stuff in it with regards to names.
Yeah, it's got some funny names. But I read something where the names were just out of hand. Like I was trying to say them out loud, and I'm like, how the hell do you say this? This is nuts.
I mean, that
There's a
sounds like a lot of
concept.
occult grimoires in general.
There's a concept in astrology and astronomy as well. The planets aligning is called a syzygy. 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 Which is a really weird word to like give your best shot at the first time you see it.
Yeah.
When I was younger and I saw that word, I thought it was like sizzy jizzy. Like I have no fucking
Jizzy.
jizzy.
We're back to cooming.
Coming.
Jizzy. Well, I mean, that jizz magic. That's what it is.
God.
Okay, I think that's honestly, how long have we been going for? Like an hour?
An hour and like an hour, about an hour, I think.
I think that's Lovecraft. That's pretty much.
I mean, no, there's way more, but that's all we're covering.
Yeah, that's all we're good for now. There's
like plenty more, but yeah.
Wait, do we have like an actual outro like thing that we said?
No, we could just do another 5 seconds of awkward silence. Of radio silence.
We can the first episode I signed off by saying repent and believe, which I still think was hilarious for the record.
Repent and believe. That you heard it here first.
Yeah. Elijah disavows any and all opinions that support the occult.
You are all wrong and we are right. Objectively, ontologically, we are correct and you are wrong.
Yeah, and I want to say Lovecraft did nothing wrong.
He
okay.
Well,
Lovecraft.
I'm going to counter that. I'm going to counter that by challenging our listeners to Google 2 words, or I guess a name and a word. Google, fuck, that's 3. I'm exhausted. Google H.P. Lovecraft cat name and tell me if H.P. Lovecraft did nothing wrong.
I'm going to say at my final H.P. Lovecraft take, that you should hold your friends to account for the things that they say and do. Yeah. And you should also keep in mind that oftentimes people's negative attitudes are motivated by a background of trauma you are not aware of.
Yeah. Also, let people change. Let people change. Let them get better.
Forgiveness isn't that an important thing with you, Elijah? The whole Christian forgiveness.
So I go to this book club every week, and we talk about forgiveness a lot. I'm not so sure if I'm sold on it, but
damn, Elijah, not sold on forgiveness.
I just want to say that there is a tendency recently on Twitter.com to dig up
X.
Fuck, my bad. X on
Generation X
on Pornhub.com to to dig up old shit that people did like years ago and had like if someone had like a hot political take that didn't age well, they would dig it up and they'd be like, oh no, this guy's actually a big piece of shit. Cancel culture.
Yeah,
look, people can change. H.P. Lovecraft, he changed.
He was trying to change. If he didn't die of cancer, he might have gotten better because he did.
And what's the point of pushing some kind of political ideology if not to change minds?
It's true. I will endorse changing minds. I love how all of these episodes we spend like a whole like fucking hour shitting on someone mercilessly, and then we always end it by going.
No! Don't!
Just kidding.
No, that's just you guys. I don't.
That's the way.
I
So
don't
true.
All right.
All right. Later.
I-
So long, Dave.